I caught some guy yanking a skeleton off my lawn and stuffing it into a trash bag like he was disposing of evidence. Didn't say a word, just slapped a $450 fine notice on my mailbox and walked off like he owned the place. Turns out, according to our HOA president, I was terrorizing the neighborhood with plastic bones. I bought this house with more hope than sense. It was one of those too good to be true listings. Wraparound porch, tall oak out front, garage big enough for my workshop, and the kind of backyard that practically begs for barbecues and summer movies under the stars. Jenna thought I was crazy, said the place needed too much work, that it was haunted by bad plumbing and worse roof lines. She wasn't wrong, but something about it felt like a reset button I desperately needed to hit. See, back then, I was coming off one hell of a stretch. Divorce, job burnout, a medical scare that turned out to be nothing but still scared me enough to quit drinking for good. I just turned 40 and suddenly realized I was tired of renting my life 1 month at a time. I needed roots. I needed somewhere to build something real. This house, crooked tiles and all, felt like a second chance. Jenna and I weren't married yet when I moved in, but we were already serious. Sadie was just starting first grade, and even though I'm not her biological dad, we'd clicked fast. She's got this mix of spooky intuition and over-the-top goofiness like Wednesday Addams meets stand-up comic. The kind of kid who'll name her stuffed unicorn Doug and ask dead serious questions like, do ghosts get bored? That first Halloween in the new house, she and I went nuts. I built a fog machine out of an old leaf blower. We made fake gravestones with punny names, I'll be back, Anita Shovel, and painted the front windows to look like they had cracks with eyes peeking through. It was a disaster, but the kind of disaster you remember fondly. We laughed until we couldn't breathe. From then on, it became our thing. Every Halloween, we'd up the game. Skeleton pirate ship one year, alien abduction another. One time, I even built a full-sized coffin with a motion sensor that groaned when kids walked by. People started driving over from other neighborhoods just to see what we'd cooked up. It wasn't about showing off. Not for me. It was something else. When you've lost a lot, building something silly and over the top can feel like defiance. Like saying, I'm still here, and I've got duct tape and a glue gun, so watch out. Jenna always played along, even if she rolled her eyes at the receipts. She's the calm one, school psychologist, great at diffusing tantrums, mine included. We're opposites in a lot of ways, but she gets why Halloween matters to me. Maybe because she knows the version of me that came before this house, the one who was always waiting for the other shoe to drop. This place, this porch, these decorations, it's not just holiday cheer. It's therapy, it's family, it's this weird stitched-together little ritual that says, we made it another year, let's scare the hell out of some kids and celebrate. So when that HOA guy ripped the skeleton out of my yard like he was doing a damn exorcism, it hit different. This wasn't just some plastic decoration, this was ours. Our tradition, our signal to the universe that we're still kicking, no matter what. And someone thought they could just find that away, like it was trash? Yeah, that was the moment I knew something was coming. I just didn't realize how far they'd go, or how far I'd have to go to fight back. So the first time I met Karen Shaw, the queen bee of our HOA, I didn't even know it was her. She came walking up the driveway with this little clipboard tucked under one arm and a smile that felt off. You ever meet someone who smiles like it's something they practiced in the mirror? That's what it felt like. Too many teeth, zero warmth. She was wearing this pale pink windbreaker with our HOA's embroidered logo, like she was on some suburban safari. I was out front setting up a life-sized Grim Reaper, foam and PVC, nothing wild. And Sadie was helping me stuff fake bones into a wheelbarrow full of dead leaves. We were laughing about how gross it looked. Just a normal, fun Sunday kind of thing. Karen walked right up to the edge of the lawn and stood there like she expected me to notice her without her having to say anything. And of course, because I'm a human being, I did. I gave her a wave. Hey there, you need something? She looked me up and down, then shifted her eyes to the Grim Reaper behind me like she was trying to decide if I was the type to understand sarcasm or not. Finally, she said, just doing a little walkthrough. Checking for potential safety hazards. I almost laughed. I mean, this is a foam skeleton. It's lighter than my dog, but I kept it friendly. All good on our end. Everything secured, nothing electrical back here yet. She tilted her head, then made a little note on her clipboard like I'd just failed some invisible test. It's quite intense, don't you think? I thought she meant it as a compliment at first. I smiled. Yeah, we like to go all in. My daughter and I, it's our tradition. Karen didn't smile back. Well, some of the other families on the block have expressed concerns. They're worried the decor might be distressing for younger children. That's when I realized what was happening. This wasn't a friendly neighbor chat. This was her laying the first brick. I said, it's Halloween. Being a little spooky's the whole point. She gave this tight little chuckle, like I'd just told a joke that mildly offended her sensibilities. Of course, within reason, the HOA has some flexibility guidelines around seasonal displays, and while we encourage community participation, we also want to make sure our neighborhood maintains its welcoming atmosphere. Now, let me stop right here for a second. Flexibility guidelines. That's not in the actual HOA charter. I'd read the damn thing back when we moved in. Boring as hell, but I wasn't about to sign on to some neighborhood boot camp without knowing the rules. There was a line about seasonal displays not being a safety hazard or blocking walkways, but nothing about within reason or offending someone's delicate sensibilities. Still, I didn't want to pick a fight. Not yet. So I said, well, we've done something similar the last few years and no one said anything before. Karen's smile thinned out. Yes, well, I wasn't president last year. Ah, there it was. She wrote something else down, clicked her pen, and said, just keep in mind, some families feel this kind of imagery contributes to a hostile environment, especially in today's climate. We're simply trying to avoid unnecessary conflict. Then she turned and walked away like she'd just delivered some final ruling. Sadie watched her go and asked, is she mad about the skeletons? I shrugged. I think she's just not a Halloween person. Sadie squinted after her, then said, she looks like she hates fun. Out of the mouths of babes. I didn't think much of it after that. Seriously. I figured, okay, maybe she's a little tightly wound. Maybe she got scared by a lawn zombie when she was 5 and never recovered. Whatever. We weren't breaking any rules, and I had work to finish. I still had to rig the lighting for the haunted tree and figure out how to suspend a ghost from the porch without it tangling every time the wind picked up. But then, the next morning, I found a formal letter taped to our door. HOA letterhead. Printed, sealed, and signed at the bottom with Karen's full name, Karen J. Shaw, President, like she was the damn mayor of Halloween Town. It said we were in violation of Article 4, Section C, holiday decor that may be deemed graphic or disturbing. Again, that line was vague as hell and definitely didn't say anything specific about skeletons. But there it was, a warning, first offense, no fine yet, just a request for immediate correction. That's how they do it. They don't kick in your door or send lawyers on day one. They start slow, a gentle nudge, a friendly letter, a smile that doesn't reach the eyes. That's when I started to get this sinking feeling. Not anger yet, not even frustration, just that tickle in the back of your brain that whispers, this isn't going to be the end of it. And man, it wasn't. Not even close. 2 days after the warning letter, I came home from work and found the ghost I'd hung off the porch was gone. Just gone. Rope was still there, frayed and dangling like something had snapped in a storm. But we hadn't had a storm. No wind, no raccoons, no reason. And here's the thing, I double knotted that line. I know my knots. Theater rigging 101. That ghost wasn't falling unless someone made it fall. I looked around, even checked the bushes, thinking maybe it blew off and landed somewhere. Nope, vanished. Sadie noticed right away. She was still in her costume, witch hat askew, holding a bowl of gummy eyeballs she was planning to use for the trick-or-treat scavenger hunt we'd put together for her friends. She stared up at the porch and said, Dad, where's Lucy? Yeah, she named the ghost Lucy. I told her it must have come loose and that we'd hang it back up after dinner, but I knew someone had taken it, on purpose. The next day, another letter. This one came with a photograph printed out on cheap paper. A picture of the porch. The ghost was still there in the photo, mid-sway. Underneath it, in red pen, unsecured object, potential liability. Now it was a fine, $75. I crumpled it up and tossed it on the kitchen counter next to a stack of Halloween napkins Sadie had picked out, orange with little black cats. I told myself not to overreact. These people love their forms. They live and breathe protocols. I figured I'd just write a formal appeal, explain that the ghost was tied securely, that it must have been removed, not fallen, and we'd clear it up like adults. Rick, Sandra, a couple of neighbors who'd quietly messaged me after the HOA meeting saying they were sorry for not speaking up sooner. People were scared, but they weren't stupid, and they were tired of being steamrolled. So I took all of it and started mapping it out on a whiteboard in the garage. Yeah, I know how that sounds, but when you've got 5 years of grievances and no central filing system, a whiteboard becomes your war room. I color-coded the violations, drew lines between key events, circled names, made copies of everything, cloud backups, encrypted drives, hard copies in a waterproof bin in the attic. I was turning into a one-man HOA CIA, but the real key, the one thing that tied the whole plan together? The upcoming HOA board meeting. Karen had scheduled it, like always, to be as inconvenient as possible, midweek, right around dinner time, when most folks either forget or flat out can't make it. That's how she kept control. Low attendance, fake unanimity, no dissent. But not this time. I spent the next 2 weeks quietly rallying neighbors, the ones with kids who loved our decorations, the ones who'd been fined for petty nonsense, the ones who just wanted the HOA to stop acting like a homeowner's version of the FBI. Jenna helped a lot. People listened to her. School psychologist, patient tone, knows how to talk to people without sounding like she's trying to sell them something. Sadie even made flyers. Help Save Halloween in glitter marker with a little skeleton doing jazz hands. We passed them out, stuck them on windshields, mailed a few. It wasn't about the decor anymore. It was about control, about fairness, about a community being bullied by one person hiding behind a rulebook. I didn't tell anyone about the recordings, not yet. That was going to be my ace, my nuke. I needed to time it right. Karen still didn't know what I had. She probably thought I was sulking in my garage, licking my wounds and deciding which blow-mold pumpkin to toss out first. Good. Let her think that. Because when that board meeting came, I was going to walk in with the biggest grin she'd ever seen and a plan that'd rip her perfect little empire to shreds. The night of the meeting, I didn't sleep. I just laid there in bed, staring at the ceiling, playing out every possible version of how it could go down. Karen cutting me off, Karen smirking through it all, Karen calling security, flipping the script, gaslighting me in front of everyone. I kept thinking I wasn't ready, that I should have waited, built it up more, brought in media, something bigger. But then I remembered something Sandra had said while she chain-smoked her way through old HOA emails. You don't wait for tyrants to hand you the right moment. You take it. So that night, I took it. The meeting was held in the same clubhouse as always. Low ceilings, buzzing fluorescent lights, folding chairs lined up in crooked rows like a sad church basement. Normally, only 5 or 6 residents show up. That night, there were almost 40. And not just the usual retirees either. Parents, couples, a few teens from the high school. I saw Shannon from next door with her twins, Pam from the cul-de-sac, and even Mr. Jenkins, who once told me my fog machine made his dog think the yard was on fire. They all showed up. And Karen? She looked rattled the second she walked in. Her smile was on, of course, it always was, but it looked tighter than usual. Her eyes darted across the room like she was trying to find someone, anyone who might tell her this wasn't happening. She took her usual spot at the front, behind the folding table that served as the board. Joel was there too, arms crossed, trying to look important. 2 other board members who might as well have been wax figures flanked them, clearly there for the ride, not the fight. Karen started with the usual nonsense, reading off a bland agenda, talking about landscaping updates, something about a mulch order being delayed. You could feel the energy in the room buzzing under all of it. No one was there for mulch. Finally, during community concerns, I stood up. My hands were sweating, I could feel my heartbeat in my teeth, but I walked to the front, turned to face the room, and said, I've got something to share with the board and the community. Karen tried to cut in with a cheerful, Mike, let's remember we need to keep comments brief and respectful. I didn't even look at her. I'll be brief, but you'll want to hear this. I set my laptop on the table and hooked it up to the little projector they used for budget slides. I had everything queued up, the video of Karen trespassing and yanking skeletons out of my yard, followed by the audio of her planning to push me out through manufactured fines. I hit play. The room went still. I heard a woman gasp. Someone near the back let out a low, whoa. Karen's face drained. She reached for a folder in front of her, like that was going to stop what was happening. I let it all play. No pausing, no editing, just truth. When it was done, I turned back to the crowd and said, this is what your HOA leadership has been doing. Not protecting the community, not ensuring safety, targeting residents, manufacturing violations, trespassing, tampering with property, planning to force people out of their homes. I let that sit. No one moved. You could hear the AC humming. Karen tried to regain control. She stood up, smoothing her blazer like that could uncrack her voice. This is clearly a manipulated... Nope, I said. Original files, unedited, time-stamped. And I have copies stored in 3 places, including with an attorney and a local news contact, so maybe don't say anything you can't walk back. She froze. Joel looked like he wanted to climb inside the HVAC system and disappear. Then Pam, the sweet lady who'd once baked HOA-approved gluten-free cookies for the neighborhood block party, stood up and said, I move for a vote of no confidence in the current president. It was like a damn spark lit the room. Another neighbor stood. Then another. People started clapping, mumbling, nodding. A man I barely knew raised his hand and said, seconded. Karen's voice went sharp, shrill. This isn't procedure, you can't just... But she'd lost them. Completely. The board members who'd always rubber-stamped her nonsense, they looked like they wanted to vanish. One of them, Bill I think, muttered something to Joel, then turned to me and asked, "Do you have more documentation?" "I do," I said. "A lot more." And then I handed over a sealed envelope with copies of the financial inconsistencies Sandra had given me. Expense reports, fudged vote counts. Emails where Karen had pre-written decisions before meetings had even happened. That was the moment the room turned completely. People weren't just angry, they were embarrassed. Embarrassed they'd let it go on this long. Embarrassed they hadn't spoken up sooner. But more than anything, they were awake now. Wide awake. Karen sat back down, not gracefully, not like she was conceding, just like she was out of moves. I don't think she even blinked. After that, everything happened fast. The board scheduled an emergency vote to suspend Karen's authority pending further investigation. A committee was formed, an actual one, not one of her fake back-channel groups. The fines against me were nullified. My decorations were reinstated without restriction. And, best of all, they froze any ability for the HOA to initiate lien proceedings against residents without verified third-party review. I didn't smile that night. Not because I wasn't happy, I was, but it wasn't about winning a petty war anymore. It was about shifting the ground under someone who'd abused her power for years and finally watched it crumble under her feet. After the meeting, neighbors I barely knew came up to shake my hand. One guy said, "You've got stones, man." Another said, "Should have recorded her sooner." Sandra hugged me with so much force I think I cracked a rib. Jenna cried. Quietly. She told me she was proud. Told me I scared the hell out of her when I stood up, but that she'd never seen me look more alive. Even Sadie got in on it. She made me a medal out of tinfoil and string the next morning. On it, in big marker letters, she wrote, "HOA Slayer." I hung it in the garage, right above the werewolf prop we never finished. That's when I knew. The fight wasn't over. But I'd already won. After the meeting, it spread faster than I ever expected. At first, it was just the neighborhood Facebook group. Someone, probably Pam or Shannon, posted a recap of what went down. No frills, just straight facts. HOA president exposed for targeting a resident, caught on video trespassing and destroying property, followed by an audio recording where she admitted she was pushing people out. The comments exploded. People who hadn't shown up that night were tagging each other, asking, "Is this real? Was this about the Halloween house? Wait, Karen did what?" And then someone uploaded the actual video. I didn't even know who. Could have been Rick, could have been one of the kids who was filming on their phone while the projector played. Either way, it was out there. Within a couple days, it had over 5,000 views and was being shared in other HOA groups in neighboring communities. I started getting random messages from people I'd never met. One guy from 2 towns over sent me a private message that just said, "My HOA president pulled the same stunt last year. You're a damn hero." I wasn't trying to be a hero. I just didn't want to lose my house over skeletons. But it turns out when you stand up to a bully, especially a well-dressed, clipboard-carrying one, you don't just fight for yourself. You fight for everyone who thought they had no voice. But while I was sitting at my desk, typing out that appeal, I got a ping on my phone. A message from Jenna. It was a screenshot of a post from the neighborhood Facebook group, the one I never joined because I like to keep at least some joy in my life. The post was from Karen. It said, "Friendly reminder, Halloween is a family holiday. Let's be mindful of decor that might frighten young children or make our community feel unsafe. We want all families to feel welcome here." She didn't tag me, she didn't mention names, but she added a photo, my porch, cropped and filtered, but it was ours. And the comments? God, some of them were just polite clucks. "Totally agree, Karen. Thank you for keeping us safe." But a few got nasty. Whoever that is, they clearly don't have kids. Looks like a haunted crack house, not appropriate. Are those even real skeletons? I sat there just staring at the screen. Not because I was shocked, this is exactly the kind of passive-aggressive nonsense I expected from HOA types, but because of how fast it was turning. This wasn't just a note on the door anymore, this was public, this was intentional. Jenna tried to calm me down. She said not to feed into it, that maybe it would blow over. I wanted to believe her. But later that week we got another letter, this one citing unauthorized extension cords across a public walking path. That was the cord that ran from our porch to the bush where we'd hidden a little motion sensor for the jump scare cat Sadie had helped build. We'd covered the cord with a rubber safety strip, taped it down, the same way I do at every theater show I've ever worked on. $150 fine. It started to feel like they were just looking for stuff. Like they had a checklist of anything even remotely Halloween related and were crossing it off one by one. And it wasn't just letters anymore. One night I caught two guys walking past the house and laughing. Not like, hey, cool decorations, laughing, mocking. One of them pointed at our yard and said loud enough for me to hear, "That's the one Karen warned us about." Warned them. Like I was a threat. A danger. Another night, I found someone had kicked over one of our fake tombstones and bent the wire frame. A candy bucket Sadie left on the porch was gone. Jenna started insisting we pull things in at night, just to be safe. I hated it. I hated that she was right. Sadie asked why we were taking everything down early, and I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth. So I just said, some people don't like Halloween as much as we do. Which is technically true. It just doesn't capture the whole picture. Like how some people will use the word safety as a weapon. Like how control freaks dress up their vendettas in community concern. Karen wasn't slowing down either. A week before Halloween, she called an emergency HOA meeting. I didn't even know you could do that without some notice, but she posted it online, printed flyers, and had a neighbor go door to door, reminding residents of their responsibility to maintain visual harmony during seasonal events. I showed up because I'm not the kind of guy who lets people talk about him behind his back. It was held at the little community clubhouse near the pool. Folding chairs, a table with store-brand cookies, and that weird artificial lemon smell HOA buildings always have. Karen stood at the front like she was running a board meeting for the UN. She went on about how this year's decorations had gotten out of hand. She used phrases like graphic imagery, inappropriate for children, inconsistent with community values. She never once said my name. She didn't have to. At one point, she pulled out a slideshow, literal PowerPoint, picture after picture of my yard, cropped, zoomed, lit up to look worse than it actually did. The skeletons, the fog, the scarecrow Sadie and I built together. She framed it all like some kind of menace to public order. When I stood up to say something, she interrupted, said comments would be collected and reviewed after the meeting. Someone 2 rows behind me muttered, "Just take it down, man. It's not worth it." That one stung, not because he was right, but because he sounded tired, like someone who already gave up once and wanted company in the quitting. I left before the meeting ended, couldn't sit through another minute of it. Jenna followed me out, her hand on my shoulder like she was trying to anchor me to the earth. The next morning, I got the big one. A certified letter, HOA stationery, stamped and notarized. They were filing an official grievance, 3 violations in 30 days. That meant I could be subjected to lien proceedings if I didn't achieve compliance. They were threatening my house, all because of plastic skeletons and a little fog machine. And here's the worst part. I started to believe I might lose, not just the fight, the house, the whole thing. That was the moment I knew we weren't just decorating for Halloween anymore. We were at war. I tried to play nice. I mean, believe it or not, my first instinct wasn't to fight. It never was. I'm not a light the torches, burn it all down kind of guy. Not unless I absolutely have to be. All I wanted was for things to calm down. Let Sadie enjoy her Halloween. Let us be a damn family. Let people mind their business for once. So the day after I got that certified letter, after I sat in the kitchen just staring at the envelope like it might disappear if I looked hard enough, I printed out every single page of our HOA's covenants and guidelines. Again, I highlighted every line that even mentioned decorations or seasonal displays. I checked every date, every amendment, and I couldn't find one single part that explicitly banned what we were doing. Sure, it was vague. Decor should not be excessive. Displays should align with community standards. But nowhere did it say skeletons were banned. Nowhere did it say fog machines were forbidden. Nowhere did it say I had to stop being a dad who liked to go a little over the top in October. So I wrote my appeal, I worded it carefully. I didn't rant, I didn't accuse, I just laid it all out. The timeline, the photos, the safety measures, the fact that we'd done similar displays in previous years without incident. I attached proof. I even included testimonials from 2 neighbors, Shannon from next door and Bill, the retired guy across the street, both of whom said they loved what we were doing and looked forward to it every year. I hand-delivered the appeal to the HOA Dropbox and emailed a digital copy just to be sure. I even CC'd the HOA attorney, a guy named Raymond who had all the personality of a wet napkin. And then I waited. Nothing. Days went by. No response, no acknowledgement, not even a thanks, we'll look into it. So I followed up. Still nothing. A week later, I got a letter back. Not an answer. Just a notice saying my appeal was being processed and reviewed by the board at an upcoming date to be determined. No timeline, no contact info, just more words that meant stalling. Jenna kept telling me to be patient, that maybe they were just overwhelmed, but I wasn't buying it. You don't ignore a grievance like this unless you're doing it on purpose, unless the plan is to drag things out until the problem either folds or fades away. But I wasn't folding. Not yet. So I took it a step further. I called the county, asked if they had any jurisdiction over HOA disputes. They didn't. Surprise. They told me to hire a private attorney, which, you know, is super easy when you've got a mortgage, a kid, and a stack of fines totaling over $600. Still, I called a buddy of mine, Tony Perez, who's a real estate lawyer in town. We'd worked together years ago on a local stage production, and I knew he did HOA stuff sometimes. I wasn't asking for him to jump in legally, just to give me a read. He looked over the documents and said exactly what I was afraid of. They're walking a tightrope, Mike. Everything they've done is just vague enough to be hard to challenge, but pointed enough to feel personal. They're trying to provoke you into overreacting. I asked him what my options were. He said I could take them to small claims court, but the burden of proof would be on me, and it'd take weeks, maybe months. And even if I won, all I'd get is the fines reversed. The lien threat would still be hanging over me unless I challenged that separately. So basically, I could fight, but they'd just keep moving the goalposts. That's when I started knocking on doors. Not metaphorically, literally. I went house to house, block to block, asking neighbors if they'd seen anything, if they'd gotten similar letters, if they'd been part of the complaints Karen kept referencing. Most of them were polite, some were nervous. A few just closed their doors before I could finish my sentence. One woman, Pam, lives at the end of the cul-de-sac, told me she'd gotten a flyer asking her to be vigilant about seasonal decor that could distress children, but she had no idea it was about me. "That's your house?" she asked, like I'd just confessed to being Banksy. She told me her kids loved walking past our place, that they made her drive by twice a day so they could watch the glowing jack-o'-lanterns flicker on at night. She seemed genuinely surprised there was even an issue. Then she lowered her voice and said, "You know Karen's been president for almost 5 years now. No one even runs against her. People are scared to speak up." Scared. In a gated suburb with dog-walking stations and lemonade stands, people were scared of the HOA president. I went home that night feeling like I'd stepped into a parallel universe. The next day, I tried the school route. Jenna had a friend who worked in administration. She asked if there'd been any complaints from parents about our decorations, thinking maybe that was where this all started. Turns out, nothing. No calls, no notes, nothing flagged. That night, Sadie caught me sitting in the garage with a half-built werewolf prop and a beer I wasn't drinking. She climbed onto the workbench next to me and just sat there, quiet. Finally, she asked, "Are they going to make us leave?" I didn't even know what to say. Because the truth is, for the first time since all this started, I wasn't sure. I'd done everything right. I followed the rules. I went through the system. I appealed. I researched. I talked to neighbors. I got legal advice. And none of it mattered. Karen wasn't playing by the rules. She was using them like a mask, like a prop. She wore policy like a costume to hide the fact that she just didn't like me, or didn't like Halloween, or didn't like fun, period. And all my attempts to reason with that, to fix it peacefully, they just made her bolder. So that night, I sat with Sadie until she fell asleep in my lap, then tucked her in and stood in her doorway for a long time, listening to her breathe. And I made myself a promise. I wouldn't let someone like Karen take this away from her. Not this house, not this season, not our stupid, wonderful, over-the-top decorations. She wanted to fight? Fine. But I wasn't playing defense anymore. I honestly thought I'd hit the wall. You know that point where you're all out of moves and your brain's just looping the same thoughts over and over like a bad song? That was me. I'd sat through the threats, the silence, the fake smiles, the staged outrage. I'd tried logic, I'd tried patience, I'd tried being the reasonable adult, and none of it mattered. Karen kept pushing, and I was starting to feel like maybe she could push us out if she really wanted to. Then, out of nowhere, Rick Mathers knocked on my door. Rick lives 2 houses down. Retired engineer, keeps to himself. Nice enough guy, always waves when he's mowing his lawn, but we'd never really talked beyond the occasional, "Hey, how's it going?" He's one of those guys who's always fixing something, gutters, sprinklers, wiring, and he's got this huge German shepherd named Duke who looks like he could eat a Buick but is actually scared of mailboxes. I liked Rick, just never had a reason to think much more about him. That night, he shows up on my porch holding a flash drive. Didn't even say hello, just handed it to me and said, "You should probably see this." Then he turned and walked away. No explanation, no small talk, just that. I went inside, plugged it into my laptop, and at first I thought he'd given me the wrong file. The first video was grainy security cam footage, angled low across a lawn. Not mine. His, I realized. It showed a figure walking toward my house in the dark. Hoodie, ball cap, gloves, kind of hunched. At first, I couldn't tell what they were doing. Then I saw it. They were pulling down one of the decorations, one of the skeletal arms we'd planted in the flower bed, reaching up like it was clawing out of the dirt. The figure yanked it out, snapped it in half, and tossed the pieces into a bag. Then they did the same to a few other props. Fast, methodical. Not a teenager messing around. This was someone who knew what they were doing. They moved with a weird confidence, like they weren't worried about being caught, like they belonged there. And then, just before they left the frame, the hoodie slipped back for a second as they turned their head. It was Karen, clear as day, side profile, sharp jawline, platinum bob, no mistaking her. I just sat there, staring at the screen, trying to make sense of it. She didn't just send people to enforce fines. She didn't just write letters or hold votes. She physically came onto our property and trashed our stuff. No HOA rule, no citation, no hearing. She just decided on her own. That wasn't just a violation. That was trespassing. Destruction of property. That was illegal. Full stop. And it got worse. The next file on the flash drive was audio. Rick must have rigged a mic out by his garage or something because you could hear voices plain as day. Karen and another man, I didn't recognize him at first, but the name Joel came up, and I realized that's the HOA's so-called maintenance coordinator. Basically her little errand boy. They were talking about me. Karen, 3 more infractions and we can escalate to a lien. Joel, think he'll fold? Karen, they always do. He'll either pay or leave. Doesn't matter which. Joel, what if he fights it? Karen, laughs. Let him. The longer he pushes, the more we can hit him with. Just make sure nothing links back to the board officially. These are community-led concerns. Got it? Joel, got it. I sat back in my chair like someone had just punched me in the ribs. This wasn't just about Halloween. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a difference in taste. Karen was targeting me. Strategically. Intentionally. With the plan of forcing me out. And she was playing the long game. The fake infractions, the vague letters, the denial of appeals, the social pressure, all of it was designed to wear me down until I gave up and moved on. This was bigger than I thought. And here's the kicker. The third file on the drive was a scan of a flyer, a pink HOA memo Rick had found stuck in his mailbox weeks earlier. It was labeled Community Cleanliness Initiative. Underneath it was a checklist labeled Properties of Concern. My address was number 3. Not even circled, just written down like a to-do list. At that point, my heart was pounding, like actually pounding. My hands were shaking. I stood up, paced the kitchen, came back, rewatched the video twice, and I realized I had her. This wasn't just HOA pettiness anymore. This was evidence, real, undeniable, time-stamped proof. Audio, video, a literal paper trail. She'd overplayed her hand, and she had no idea I knew. That night, I didn't sleep much. Not because I was angry, though God I was, but because something shifted in me. For the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Control. Like I finally had the steering wheel back. All the stuff she'd done to make me feel small, to make me question myself, to make me tiptoe around my own front yard, none of it mattered now. Because the moment she stepped onto my property and laid her hands on my decorations, the moment she opened her mouth and said those words to Joel, she gave me everything I needed. She thought I'd just take it. She thought I was one of those people who folds when the pressure gets high enough. She was wrong, because I wasn't alone anymore, and I wasn't backing down. I didn't go full revenge fantasy mode right away. I mean, the instinct was there. It was definitely there. Somewhere deep in my chest, there was a little voice screaming to post the footage everywhere, blast it across Facebook, rent a damn billboard with Karen's face next to the word liar. But I've lived long enough to know you don't swing unless you're ready to land the hit, and more importantly, you don't play checkers with someone who thinks she's playing chess. So I started small. First, I called Tony. He picked up on the first ring, probably because the last time I'd texted him, all I said was, I have proof. We met later that day at this little cafe downtown that makes a decent coffee and an absolutely inedible chicken wrap. I brought my laptop and the flash drive Rick had given me. Tony's not an excitable guy. He's one of those attorneys who always looks mildly disappointed, even when he agrees with you. But when I showed him the footage and let him listen to the recording, I swear I saw one eyebrow twitch, which, in Tony speak, is like falling out of his chair in shock. Holy hell, he said after the second playthrough, you're sitting on a gold mine. That was the moment I knew this could be bigger than just getting my fines reversed. I asked him, flat out, "Can I take her down with this?" He leaned back, tapped a pen against his chin, then said something that stuck with me. "Not by yourself." He was right. I had evidence, but Karen had the board. The HOA, the rules, the vote count, the community influence. She had her claws in everything. If I wanted to hit back, I needed leverage, and not just legal, public. So the plan started to take shape. First thing we did was organize. Tony helped me catalog everything. Timestamps, files, emails, HOA letters, pictures, voice memos, copies of my appeals, even that ridiculous photo Karen posted of my porch. Every detail mattered. We weren't just building a case, we were building a narrative, a timeline of harassment, a portrait of abuse of power. While Tony handled the legal framing, I got to work on the social side. Remember Sandra? She was the former treasurer of the HOA, Karen's friend turned enemy. I hadn't spoken to her since she stormed out of that HOA meeting 2 years ago after Karen accused her of financial carelessness in front of the whole room. I'd heard rumors she'd moved to another part of town, but turns out she was still living here, just a few streets over. Quiet, laying low. I showed up at her door with a grocery store pumpkin pie and a very sheepish smile. She answered in a bathrobe with a cigarette in one hand and a glass of wine in the other, and before I even opened my mouth, she said, "If this is about Karen, I hope you brought a tape recorder." I loved her instantly. Turns out Sandra had her own little archive, printouts, meeting minutes, inconsistencies in HOA expense reports, reimbursement checks that went through without any documentation, and best of all, an email from Karen from last year that literally said, "Don't worry, we'll say it was a community vote even if no one shows up." Yeah, that happened. Sandra didn't even hesitate. She handed over a manila folder the size of a phone book and said, "I've been waiting for someone to grow a spine." Now I had documentation to support Rick's recordings, pattern of behavior, dishonesty, misuse of power, and maybe the most important thing? I had witnesses. A local reporter from a small paper reached out a few days later, said she was covering unusual uses of HOA power in suburban neighborhoods, and wanted to talk. I met her at a diner and told her everything, from the decorations to the fines to the video. I didn't have to dress anything up. The truth was already absurd enough. A week after that, the article ran online under the headline, "When Skeletons Spark a Revolt, One Man's Fight Against HOA Overreach." Corny, absolutely, but it got picked up by a local news station. They came to my house, interviewed me on the porch with Sadie's tinfoil medal hanging proudly behind me. I made sure to shout out Rick and Sandra and Jenna. I didn't want this to look like I'd done it alone, because I hadn't, not even close. Karen, on the other hand, she disappeared. Like poof. Gone. A day after the meeting, she stopped answering HOA emails. The board announced she had stepped down voluntarily, which was code for probably threatened to sue if we didn't let her walk away quietly. Joel followed a week later. No press, no explanation. Just vanished into the manicured shrubbery of suburbia. But the fallout didn't stop there. The county opened a formal review of our HOA's finances. All those questionable expense reports Sandra flagged, the consulting fees, the community beautification payments that just so happened to go through Karen's husband's landscaping company. Yeah, those were getting a second look now, and the best part? The HOA bylaws were put under a full revision process. For the first time in years, actual residents, not Karen's hand-picked lapdogs, were invited to join the review committee. I was asked to be part of it. I said yes. I figured if I could spend 20 hours rigging up a fake graveyard with flickering lights and screaming pumpkins, I could spend a few meetings helping rewrite the rules that nearly cost me my sanity. The fines they'd stuck me with were not only voided, but publicly acknowledged as misapplied. I didn't get a check, wasn't expecting one, but they mailed me an official letter of apology. Typed, .rat, signed, with the HOA seal embossed on the bottom like they were surrendering a castle. I framed it, right next to Sadie's medal, and here's the part that really hit me. Neighbors I barely knew started opening up, telling me how they'd been fined for things that didn't make sense, how they'd let stuff slide because they didn't want the hassle. One guy had been cited for leaving his recycling bin out too early the night before pickup. Another got written up for planting the wrong species of bush. These weren't mistakes. These were control tactics. We'd all just been too polite, too conflict avoidant, too worn down to push back. But now, people were showing up. Meetings weren't ghost towns anymore. Residents were asking questions, demanding accountability. Someone even proposed putting term limits on board members, and it actually passed. Halloween came back too. The next year, we didn't just decorate, we went hard. I turned my front yard into a full haunted pirate ship, complete with glowing lanterns, fog, and a rigged-up cannon that shot air blasts when kids walked by. Jenna helped string lights across the porch. Sadie painted skulls onto foam balls like she was born to be a mini Tim Burton, and the best part? The entire block joined in. What used to be a quiet street with maybe one sad scarecrow became this full-blown Halloween experience. People coordinated themes. One house did zombies. Another built a graveyard with a Karen the Destroyer tombstone that made me laugh so hard I choked on my cider. Nobody told us we couldn't. Nobody sent warnings. Nobody ripped down decorations in the middle of the night because we'd made it clear. We weren't afraid anymore. I didn't win because I yelled louder. I didn't win because I broke anything or stormed the gates. I won because I stayed on my feet, because I refused to be embarrassed for caring, for decorating my lawn with bones and cobwebs and silly little ghosts. I won because I told the truth, and the truth, it turns out, is a lot scarier to people like Karen than any skeleton could ever be. Last week I sat out on the porch with a cup of coffee and just listened. It was quiet in the best kind of way. Kids' laughter echoing faintly from down the street, wind rustling through the oak tree, the occasional bark from someone's overfed golden retriever. Our jack-o'-lanterns were still out, even though Halloween had come and gone. They'd started to sink in a little. One looked like it was mid-sneeze, but I didn't have the heart to toss them yet. They earned their place this year. Sadie was sprawled across the porch swing, sketching ideas for next Halloween in her notebook. She's already planning something with animatronic bats and a fog-breathing dragon. Jenna was inside making chili, humming off-key to Stevie Nicks like she does when she thinks no one's listening. And me, I just sat there, soaking it in. This house, our house, feels different now. Not because it changed, but because I did. I walk through the front gate with my head up now. I wave to neighbors and they wave back. Not that fake, tight-lipped, I hope you trim your bushes wave. Real ones. People actually stop and chat now. Ask about Sadie's art. Bring over old Halloween props to see if we can Frankenstein them into something cool next year. One guy even offered me a fog machine from his garage, said he figured I'd put it to better use than he ever would. It's weird, right? All of this started over a few skeletons and a fog machine, but it was never really about Halloween. It was about control, about fear, about one person trying to shrink a community into something quiet and obedient and safe. Safe in the way beige walls are safe, in the way silence is safe, and we let her for a long time, but not anymore. I think about that a lot, how easy it is to hand over pieces of your life without even realizing it. How quiet compliance sneaks up on you. One little rule at a time, one silent shrug, one, it's not worth the trouble. Until suddenly you're living in a neighborhood where people are afraid to put up a string of orange lights. I'll never forget the way it felt to stand in that meeting and press play, to watch Karen's face drop as her own words played out in front of a room full of people who finally saw her. It wasn't about humiliating her. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about flipping the lights on, showing the shadows for what they were. Giving people permission to say, this isn't okay, and I'm not alone in thinking that. Jenna said something to me later that stuck with me. She said, you didn't just protect our yard, you protected everyone's permission to be weird and joyful and loud if they want to be. She's right. This neighborhood feels a little more human now. Imperfect. Messy, fun. There's a retired guy down the street who plays jazz on his porch every Friday. Kids ride their scooters without helmets and without someone filing a report. Pam started hosting movie nights on her lawn with a projector, and nobody's tried to shut her down over after-dark gatherings. It's not perfect, but it's ours, and people feel like they belong again. Sometimes, late at night, I'll catch myself replaying those earlier moments. The fines, the stress, the night I found Lucy the ghost ripped down. I remember how powerless I felt, how close I came to giving up, to saying, screw it, take the decorations down, let her win. And I'm so damn glad I didn't, because the funny thing is, I thought I was fighting for Halloween. Turns out, I was fighting for home, and it's never looked better. I don't know what Karen's doing now. Honestly, I don't care. I hope she finds something that brings her joy. Maybe she'll take up knitting or discover birdwatching or move to one of those 55-plus gated communities where HOA presidents wear whistles and everyone gets fined for using the wrong type of mulch. But here? We've got ghosts and pirate ships and flying bats and a werewolf in the garage just waiting for his big moment next October. And if anyone tries to tear it down again, well, they're gonna have to go through me and probably half the block, and a German shepherd named Duke.